I never thought I'd be the guy to tell a story like this. You know, the one where everything you thought you knew about your life gets flipped upside down. My name is Mark Stevens. I'm 42, and I've lived in Indianapolis, Indiana, my whole life. I married my high school sweetheart, Sarah, when we were both 22. We've got 2 kids, Emily and Jake, and a pretty decent house in a quiet neighborhood. I work as a project manager at a construction firm, and Sarah is a nurse at the local hospital. On paper, everything was perfect. But that was before I found out about her betrayal. It all started on a seemingly normal Wednesday. I remember it clearly because Wednesdays are my work-from-home days. It was a nice perk from my job, allowing me to avoid the hectic commute and spend a bit more time with the kids when they got back from school. On that particular day, I was finishing up a conference call with a client when I noticed Sarah's phone buzzing incessantly on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but this time something felt off. The call ended, and I walked over to see what the commotion was about. A string of messages from a contact named Mike lit up the screen. My heart sank. Who the hell was Mike? I picked up the phone and entered the passcode, something Sarah and I had always shared without any need for secrecy. The messages were flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and innuendos that made my stomach churn. Had a great time last night. Can't stop thinking about you, one read. Can't wait to see you again. When can we meet? Another chimed in. I felt like I was in a bad dream. This couldn't be real. Sarah was the love of my life, my partner through thick and thin. How could she do this to us? I decided to confront her later that evening, but not before gathering my thoughts. I wanted to give her the chance to explain, but I needed to understand why and how this could happen. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat Sarah down in our living room. The room felt colder than usual, the air thick with tension. I took a deep breath and handed her the phone. "Who is Mike?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her face turned pale, and for a moment she just stared at the screen. Then she looked at me with eyes that held a mixture of guilt and fear. "Mark, I can explain," she began, but I cut her off. "I want the truth, Sarah. No more lies." She took a deep breath and started to talk. "Mike he's a doctor at the hospital. We started talking a few months ago. Just friendly at first, but then it turned into something more. I never meant for it to happen, but I got caught up in it. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me." "Caught up in what, Sarah? How long has this been going on?" She looked down at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. "About 3 months," she whispered. 3 months. For 3 months, she had been seeing another man behind my back. I felt like a fool. How had I not seen the signs? I wanted to yell, to scream, but I knew that wouldn't help anything. Instead, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since I read those messages. "Why, Sarah? Why would you do this to us?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to explain. "I don't know, Mark. I guess I felt neglected. You've been so busy with work, and I've been working extra shifts at the hospital. We hardly spend any time together anymore. Mike was there. He listened, and one thing led to another. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words cut deep, but part of me understood. Our relationship had been strained lately, with both of us caught up in our own worlds. Still, it didn't justify what she had done. "So what now?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. "I don't know," she admitted. "I still love you, Mark. I want to fix this, but I don't know how." The next few days were a blur. We barely spoke, each of us trying to process what had happened. I threw myself into my work. Dear viewers, more than 90% watch my content without subscribing. If you still have not subscribed, then I ask you to do so. For me, this is the best motivation to continue, spending long hours at the office to avoid coming home. When I did come home, the atmosphere was tense. The kids could sense something was wrong, but we tried to shield them from the worst of it. One evening, about a week after the confrontation, I came home to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of her. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. She had been crying. "I think we need to see a counselor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I hadn't expected that. "A counselor?" "Yes, we need help, Mark. We can't go on like this." I sat down across from her, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. Maybe, just maybe, we could work through this. I agreed to give it a try for the sake of our marriage and our kids. We started seeing a marriage counselor named Dr. White. Our first session was awkward, to say the least. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, barely making eye contact. Dr. White began by asking us to share why we were there. Sarah spoke first. She talked about feeling lonely and neglected, about how she missed the closeness we used to share. She admitted to the affair, but insisted that she wanted to make things right. When it was my turn, I talked about the betrayal, about how much it hurt to find out that the person I trusted most had been lying to me. I admitted that I had been distant, but I also expressed my anger and confusion. Dr. White listened patiently, nodding occasionally. Then she asked a question that took us both by surprise. What do you both want from this counseling? Do you want to save your marriage, or are you looking for closure? I looked at Sarah, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with. We both answered at the same time. I want to save our marriage. The sessions that followed were difficult. We had to confront our issues head-on, talk about things we had avoided for years. There were tears, shouting matches, and moments of silence so heavy it felt like the room would collapse. But slowly, we started to make progress. We began to communicate better, to really listen to each other. Rebuilding trust was the hardest part. Every time Sarah's phone buzzed, I felt a pang of anxiety. Every time she was late coming home from work, my mind went to dark places. Dr. White gave us exercises to help rebuild trust, like checking in with each other throughout the day and setting aside time to talk about our feelings. One night, about a month into counseling, Sarah came home with a letter. She handed it to me, her hands shaking. "It's from Mike," she said. I opened it and read. In it, Mike apologized for his part in the affair. He said he didn't want to cause any more harm and was transferring to another hospital. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. At least that chapter was finally closing. As the months passed, things slowly started to improve. We spent more time together as a family, took a weekend trip to a cabin in the woods, and even started having regular date nights again. The kids seemed happier, and the tension in the house began to dissipate. There were still moments of doubt and fear, but we were committed to making it work. We had learned to communicate better, to be more present for each other. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah took my hand. "Thank you for giving us another chance," she said. I squeezed her hand, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. "We're in this together," I replied. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. Even though things were getting better between Sarah and me, the scars of her betrayal ran deep. I found myself wrestling with the memories of those messages and the image of her with Mike. It wasn't easy to let go of the anger and the pain, but I was determined to try. Our marriage was worth fighting for. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The silence was oppressive, and my thoughts wandered back to that fateful day when I discovered the truth. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at the kitchen table, trying to clear my mind. But the images wouldn't leave. Sarah found me there a little while later, nursing my second beer. She sat down across from me, her expression concerned. "Mark, what's going on?" she asked gently. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I'm just struggling, Sarah. I want to move past this, but it's hard. Every time I see your phone, I get anxious. Every time you're late, I start imagining things." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I know it's hard. I'm sorry for everything I've put you through, but I'm here, and I'm committed to making this work. We'll get through this together." Her words were comforting, but the doubts lingered. I knew it would take time, but I was willing to give it all I had. For her, for our kids, and for the life we had built together. I decided to join a support group for people dealing with infidelity. It was Sarah's suggestion, and though I was hesitant at first, I eventually agreed. The group met every Thursday evening at a community center not far from our house. The first time I went, I wasn't sure what to expect. The room was filled with people from all walks of life, each with their own stories of betrayal and heartbreak. We sat in a circle, and one by one, people shared their experiences. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and began to speak. My name is Mark, and my wife cheated on me. The words felt heavy on my tongue, but saying them out loud was oddly liberating. I talked about how I found out, how it shattered my world, and how we were trying to rebuild. The group listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and understanding. It felt good to be among people who truly understood what I was going through. After the meeting, a guy named Tom approached me. He was in his late 40s, with a kind face and a sympathetic smile. "Hey Mark, I've been where you are. It's tough, but it does get better. If you ever need to talk, here's my number." I took his number, grateful for the support. Over the next few weeks, I attended the meetings regularly. Sharing my story and hearing others' experiences helped me process my feelings and find a sense of camaraderie. I began to feel less alone in my struggle. During this time, Sarah and I also focused on our family. We wanted to create positive memories and strengthen our bond. We planned family outings like trips to the zoo and picnics in the park. The kids loved these activities, and it felt good to see them happy. One Saturday, we decided to take a day trip to Brown County State Park. It was one of our favorite spots, filled with hiking trails and scenic views. We packed a picnic and set off early in the morning. The drive was filled with laughter and music, and for a while, it felt like old times. We spent the day exploring the trails, taking in the fresh air and beautiful landscapes. The kids ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the trees. Sarah and I walked hand in hand, enjoying the moment. It was one of those rare days where everything felt right. As we sat down for our picnic, Emily and Jake started playing a game of tag. Sarah and I watched them, a sense of peace settling over us. "I'm glad we did this," Sarah said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Me too," I replied, squeezing her hand. For a moment, the weight of the past few months lifted, and I allowed myself to believe that we could truly move forward. Around this time, an unexpected opportunity came my way. My boss, Jim, called me into his office one afternoon with some news. "Mark, I've been really impressed with your work lately," he said. "There's an opening for a senior project manager in our Chicago office. It's a big step up, and I think you'd be perfect for it. What do you think?" I was taken aback. The offer was tempting, a higher salary, more responsibility, and a chance to advance my career. But it would also mean moving the family to Chicago, leaving behind everything we knew in Indianapolis. "I'll need some time to think about it," I replied. "Of course. Take a week and let me know," Jim said, giving me a supportive pat on the back. I went home that evening with the offer weighing heavily on my mind. When I told Sarah, she looked surprised but intrigued. "Chicago, huh? That's a big move," she said. "Yeah, but it's a great opportunity. What do you think?" She pondered for a moment. "It could be a fresh start for us, a new city, new experiences, but we'd have to think about the kids, their schools, and everything else." We spent the next few days discussing the pros and cons, considering how the move would impact our lives. It wasn't an easy decision, but eventually, we decided to take the leap. The opportunity was too good to pass up, and a change of scenery might be just what we needed. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. We put our house on the market, found a new place in Chicago, and prepared the kids for the move. Emily and Jake were excited and nervous, but we reassured them that it would be an adventure. Leaving Indianapolis was bittersweet. It was the city where we had built our lives, made countless memories, and faced our biggest challenges. But as we drove towards Chicago, I felt a sense of hope and anticipation for what lay ahead. Our new house was in a charming neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. It was bigger than our old place, with a spacious backyard and plenty of room for the kids to play. Sarah found a job at a nearby hospital, and the kids quickly settled into their new schools. I started my new role at the Chicago office, and it was both exhilarating and challenging. The work was demanding, but I thrived on the responsibility. My colleagues were welcoming, and I felt like I was finally hitting my stride. As we settled into our new routine, Sarah and I continued our counseling sessions via video calls with Dr. White. The distance didn't diminish their impact. If anything, the change of scenery seemed to help us gain fresh perspectives on our relationship. One evening, after a particularly good session, Sarah suggested we go out for dinner. Dear viewers, I ask you to subscribe to the channel under this video. I will be very grateful to you. We found a cozy Italian restaurant nearby, and as we sat across from each other, enjoying the ambiance and delicious food, I felt a renewed sense of connection. This feels nice, Sarah said, raising her glass of wine. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass with hers. We talked about our hopes and dreams, our plans for the future. For the first time in a long while, it felt like we were truly in sync. The move to Chicago had been a good decision, giving us a fresh start and a chance to rebuild our lives together. Despite the positive changes, the past still had a way of creeping back in. One evening, while sorting through some old boxes, I came across a photo album from our early years. Flipping through the pages, I felt a pang of nostalgia and sadness. Sarah walked in and saw what I was doing. She sat down next to me, looking at the photos over my shoulder. "Those were good times," she said softly. "Yeah, they were," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. She took my hand, squeezing it gently. "We can have good times again, Mark. We just have to keep working at it." Her words were a reminder that healing was a journey, not a destination. We still had a long way to go, but we were making progress. Every day was a step forward, even if some days were harder than others. Our 15th wedding anniversary was approaching, and I wanted to do something special. It had been a turbulent year, but I wanted to celebrate how far we had come. I planned a surprise weekend getaway to Lake Geneva, a picturesque resort town in Wisconsin. When I revealed the surprise to Sarah, she was overjoyed. "This is perfect, Mark. Thank you." We left the kids with Sarah's parents and set off for our weekend retreat. The drive was filled with laughter and anticipation, and as we arrived at the charming lakeside inn, I felt a sense of excitement. The weekend was magical. We spent our days exploring the town, taking long walks by the lake, and enjoying each other's company. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace in our cozy room, I pulled out a small box from my pocket. "Happy anniversary, Sarah," I said, handing it to her. She opened it to find a delicate necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at me. "It's beautiful, Mark." "Thank you. I love you, Sarah, and I'm committed to us, no matter what." "I love you too, Mark," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. We embraced, the warmth of the fire wrapping around us. It was a moment of pure love and commitment, a reminder of why we had chosen to fight for our marriage. The months that followed were filled with continued growth and healing. Our new life in Chicago had given us a fresh start, and we were making the most of it. The kids were thriving in their new environment, and our relationship was stronger than it had been in years. We still had our challenges, of course. There were moments of doubt and fear, but we faced them together. Our communication had improved, and we made a conscious effort to be present for each other and for our family. One evening, as we sat on the porch of our new home, watching the kids play in the yard, I felt a sense of contentment. We had been through so much, but we had come out stronger on the other side. "Look at them," Sarah said, smiling as Emily and Jake chased each other around the yard. "They're so happy." "Yeah, they are," I replied, putting my arm around her. "And so am I." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in comfortable silence, enjoying the moment. The past year had been a roller coaster of emotions, but it had brought us closer together. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the yard, I felt a renewed sense of hope and gratitude. We had faced our darkest moments and come out stronger. Our love had been tested, but it had endured. And for that, I was truly thankful. Life in Chicago had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The kids were doing well in school, and Sarah and I had found a balance between work and family life. My job as a senior project manager was demanding but fulfilling, and Sarah had quickly become a valued member of her new team at the hospital. Our evenings were often filled with family dinners, homework, and occasional movie nights. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Sarah and I sat on the couch, exhausted but content. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. "Remember when we used to talk about moving to a big city?" she asked, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. "Yeah, I remember. We always thought it would be New York or Los Angeles, though," I replied with a chuckle. Chicago turned out to be a good fit for us, she said, smiling. It did, I agreed, feeling a sense of pride in how far we had come. Despite the progress we had made, there were still moments of insecurity and doubt. Trust was a fragile thing, and rebuilding it required constant effort. But every day, we took steps forward, reaffirming our commitment to each other and our family. One Friday evening, as we were finishing dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a man standing there, looking slightly nervous. He was in his early 40s, with sandy brown hair and a friendly but uncertain smile. "Hi, I'm looking for Sarah Stevens," he said. I frowned, wondering who this stranger was. "She's inside. Can I ask who you are?" "I'm Mike Anderson," he replied, extending his hand. My heart skipped a beat. This was the man Sarah had been involved with. I felt a surge of anger and 1,000 questions race through my mind. But I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the progress we had made. "Come in," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible. Sarah appeared in the hallway, her face paling as she saw our visitor. "Mike, what are you doing here?" "I needed to talk to you, Sarah. It's important," he said, looking genuinely concerned. I glanced at Sarah, who nodded slightly. "Let's talk in the living room," I suggested. We sat down, and Mike began to speak. "Sarah, I heard about your move to Chicago, and I wanted to apologize again for everything. I also wanted to let you know that I'm moving to Chicago for a new job. I didn't come here to cause any trouble. I just thought you should know." Sarah looked at him, her expression a mix of surprise and apprehension. "Mike, we've moved on. Mark and I are working through our issues, and I don't want anything to jeopardize that." "I understand," Mike said. "I just wanted to clear the air and make sure there are no misunderstandings." I watched the exchange, my emotions a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to throw him out, but another part appreciated his attempt to make amends. "Thank you for letting us know," I said finally. "But we need to focus on our family. I hope you can respect that." "I will," Mike said, standing up. "I wish you both the best." After he left, Sarah and I sat in silence for a few moments, processing what had just happened. "Are you okay?" I asked, breaking the silence. "I think so," she replied, taking a deep breath. "I didn't expect to see him again. But I'm glad he came. It feels like a chapter is closed." I nodded, hoping that this unexpected visit wouldn't disrupt the progress we had made. Despite Mike's assurances, knowing he was in the same city added an undercurrent of tension to our lives. Sarah and I continued to work on our relationship, but the knowledge that her former lover was nearby was a constant, unwelcome presence in the back of my mind. One evening, Sarah came home looking troubled. "Mike's working at the same hospital," she said, her voice tense. I felt a surge of anxiety. "Have you seen him?" "Just once, in the hallway." "We didn't talk, but it was awkward," she admitted. This revelation brought back all my insecurities. I trusted Sarah, but the situation was far from ideal. We discussed it at length, deciding to continue our counseling sessions and being honest with each other about any encounters. A few weeks later, Sarah mentioned that Mike had been assigned to a project she was involved in. It was unavoidable, but she promised to keep our boundaries clear. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, I found myself lingering outside Sarah's hospital. I didn't know why I was there. Maybe to reassure myself, maybe to confront Mike. I saw Sarah leaving, and to my relief, she was alone. She spotted me and walked over, her expression curious. "Mark, what are you doing here?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess I just needed to see for myself." She hugged me tightly. "I get it, but you don't have to worry. I'm committed to us, remember?" "I know," I said, returning her embrace. "It's just hard sometimes." "We'll get through this," she said, her voice full of determination. The following months were a test of our strength and commitment. We continued our counseling sessions, focusing on communication and rebuilding trust. We also made an effort to spend quality time together, rekindling the romance that had once defined our relationship. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the Michigan shore. It was a place we had always wanted to visit, but never had the chance. The kids were excited, and the change of scenery was a welcome break from the stress of everyday life. We rented a cabin by the lake, and the days were filled with swimming, hiking, and exploring the local attractions. One evening, as the sun set over the water, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching the kids play. "This is nice," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "It is." I agreed, feeling a sense of peace. "We should do this more often." "We should," she replied, smiling. The trip was a success, and we returned to Chicago feeling rejuvenated and closer than ever. It was a reminder that despite the challenges, our love was strong and worth fighting for. As time passed, life settled into a new normal. Sarah and I continued to work on our relationship, and the trust between us grew stronger every day. We still had our moments of doubt and insecurity, but we faced them together, supporting each other through the ups and downs. The kids were thriving, making new friends, and excelling in school. Our new life in Chicago had brought us closer as a family, and I was grateful for the fresh start it had given us. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Emily asked, "Can we have a family game night this weekend?" "That sounds like a great idea," Sarah said, smiling. "What game do you want to play?" "Monopoly!" Jake shouted, and we all laughed. "Monopoly it is," I said, feeling a sense of contentment. These moments, these simple joys, were what made everything worthwhile. A year had passed since we moved to Chicago, and life was better than I could have imagined. Sarah and I had rebuilt our trust and strengthened our bond. The kids were happy, and our family was thriving. One evening, as we celebrated our 16th wedding anniversary, I looked at Sarah, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "We've come a long way," I said, raising my glass. "We have," she replied, clinking her glass with mine, "and I wouldn't have it any other way." "To us," I said, smiling. "To us," she echoed. We had faced our darkest moments and emerged stronger. Our journey wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And as we looked to the future, I knew that no matter what challenges came our way, we would face them together.